Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini, and I am coming to you from Robert Morris University, where I have been doing these podcasts and the radio show, which goes back many years now. And I would be remiss if I didn't start this show off by thanking two groups of folks. One, an individual. I want to thank you, Joe. Joe's been my engineer now for a couple of years. Does a fantastic job of making me sound intelligent. So you know Joe was earning his money. The second thing I want to thank is you, the listeners. I said this the last episode, and I'll say it again. I love to go and just kind of peek on the stats and say, I'm curious where I'm getting listeners, who's listening to the podcast, and how many people are downloading, et cetera, et cetera. And I am just blown away by not only obviously the U.S. downloads, which are the most, but I have been getting a lot of folks listening from all over the world, and I mean all over the world. Australia is a big one, from the UK, from different parts of Europe, not just Italy, but other parts of Europe. A lot of listeners down in Brazil. And again, one of those shockers is Singapore. I love it. And then recently I've noticed I've been getting downloads from China. I've even got my friend, my comrade in Russia, who's been faithfully downloading me for a while. So all over the world, even including in parts of Africa. So I don't know how you're finding me, but the fact that I can tell you're still listening means a lot, means I must be doing something right by your standards. And at the end of the day, when you're going to do something like this, you want to do it for a couple of reasons. One, you want to do it because you enjoy it. I do enjoy this. But two, if people don't enjoy what you're doing, you have to ask yourself, why are you still doing it? So I'm glad that people enjoy what I'm doing. And with that being said, this show is about promoting various folks, primarily within the Italian-American community, but not only in the Italian-American community. But today, I am very blessed and fortunate to have a wonderful guest, and her and I are slowly getting to know each other. And, she's coming from Florida, but she's going to be back in the Pittsburgh area. But I'd like to welcome tonight's guest, and that is Erica D'Arcangelo. Erica, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I am glad that you made time to come on. So you and I, we were introduced not too long ago, and, kind of explained who I was, and you kind of explained a little bit about yourself. But, we're going to get into the book and the tour and all that good stuff, but I love to start off and introduce folks to the guests. And when I say introduce folks to the guests, I mean, where are you from? Tell me about, growing up, how the Italian culture maybe did it impact you, if it did, in what way. And that kind of seems like a no-brainer question, but you'd be surprised how many, quote, Italian Americans I've had on here who, in some cases weren't always impacted by culture because for different reasons, maybe the families didn't celebrate it to any great lengths. And obviously I've had the other extreme where they're, it's something that was just a huge part of their lives. So Erica, tell me a little bit about yourself and your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Western Pennsylvania, and I was born into an Italian family. I was actually born pretty much in a pizzeria. My grandfather opened up a pizzeria in 1960, and he and his family immigrated from Abruzzo, Italy, the region of Langiano. And basically, we really were brought up with all the, Italian culture. We had our pizzeria. We had our family dinners on Sunday. We had our traditional seafood Italian dinner on Christmas Eve. And this was really interwoven into my life so much to the point that now I write books and articles and different things on the internet about Italian culture and food and family and pizza.
Now, I want to go back to the seafood because it's funny. I too grew up on seafood, but not like crazy. Was there a no meat rule on Friday for you growing up?
Absolutely, and there was a no meat rule on Christmas Eve, and we had something called the seven fishes, which from what I've studied, there is seafood on Christmas Eve in Italy, but I don't know if it's necessarily the seven fishes or not.
Yeah, that's. I think that's an American thing, and that's okay. We don't have to say, well, listen, if it wasn't invented in Italy, then it's not Italian. It's like, these people immigrated here from Italy, and they kind of came up with their own customs based on the new experiences of the new world to them. So, but yeah, I think the seven fish is an American thing. But fish, to your point, especially on Christmas Eve, is not a new thing. I didn't know the no meat rule. I never thought about that.
Yeah, we had the no meat rule, and it was during Lent. So Friday was, I remember in our restaurant on Fridays, we would try to have a special. We would promote something that was more of a plain pizza versus a pepperoni. And I remember my grandparents, when someone ordered pepperoni on Friday during Lent, they were sort of shaking their heads.
These are not a Catholic. You're going to burn in the hell, but here's your pizza.
Yeah, they're going to burn in hell. That's pretty much what was said.
No, it's funny because I know that I think, believe it or not, though, I think the Catholic Church, because obviously most Italians, back then are Roman Catholic, I think the church used to be no meat any Friday, even not just Lent, because I know there were a lot of Italians that didn't eat meat any Friday, but especially during Lent. That's why you always have the fish fries during Lent. Did you guys do the fish too, or was that kind of like later?
No, we 100% did. In fact, we mostly worked at the pizza place on Friday because that was one of the busiest days, and our whole family kind of worked together. And somebody would always go down to the fish fries and get the fish, and then that's what we would eat.
Now, let me ask you a funny question, because you know what? You said you grew up at a pizza shop, and I've got to get something straight. I know what a margarita pizza is. Did you guys call it a margarita pizza?
We called it just a plain pizza, but from our travels to Italy, then we started calling it a margarita pizza because we were in Italy. We would order the margarita pizza.
See, that's what I thought. I'd never heard of the term margarita pizza until I went to Italy. I mean, it's not that we didn't have the equivalent here, but that seems like it's something that didn't catch on name-wise till later, unless I missed it. But since you were, in a pizza shop at a young age, I figure, you'll know. So let's talk. So now you grew up in a pizza shop. You said your mom and dad were immigrants from Italy?
My grandparents.
Okay.
So my grandfather from Abruzzo.
Okay, so he comes from Italy. Obviously, your dad's born here in the States. Talk about the language. Were you in the generation, or I should say, was your dad in the generation that was discouraged from learning Italian, or was it fairly common at work?
My dad did not learn Italian, but funny enough, he's getting his Italian citizenship right now. So he's living in Abruzzo, and he is working on learning the language while he's there. But my grandfather, when we took him back to Italy, and I think he was in his 70s, he started speaking Italian. He remembered, even though he had been in the U.S. and spoken English for the majority of his life.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of a lesson to the listeners, especially if you've got young children or young grandchildren. I cannot emphasize this enough. Start them young, because whether you think they're getting it or not, those brains are like sponges. And they get it at a young age, and it will stay with them longer. And I'll tell you a couple of funny things real quick. One, I did not learn a lot of Italian growing up. In fact, I learned almost nothing. My neighbors spoke Italian. I've heard words here and there. And so I tell people this. I say I never consciously learned it. But when I started studying Italian, I am telling you, there were words that popped out, and I'm like, oh, I know, I've heard that word before, but I can't remember what it is. So it will absolutely stick in them. And two, a funny thing, when I was in high school, I studied 4 years of German. And years later, decades later, I went to Germany, and I was floored. And I'm not saying I was fluent, but I was floored that I could actually have a basic conversation with a lady in the store. If you cost these, all little things that, to your point, that just kind of came back. So I am telling you, I encourage people to study the language, and especially if you've got kids or grandkids, teach them, get them doing something. Now, I do want to kind of switch gears now, because I want to talk about the books. Were these experiences what ultimately led you to start writing books?
It was interesting because I'd worked in the marketing industry my whole life. Went to college for marketing, was in Tampa Bay. My dad had heart surgery. This is probably about, 6 years ago. My family and I decided we needed to go home. I wanted to help my parents. So I got there. My dad was recovering, and I said, hey, let's go into the pizza place together. Let's work together. Get you out of the house. I'll help you with your marketing. I remember him being so grumpy and him being like, I don't believe in marketing. I said, that's fine. I'll help you for free. Let's just spend some time. And when I came back into the pizzeria, he would tell me stories on the drive there and the drive back, and I would film content there, and I would look at all the relics and the stuff that was saved from when my grandfather was in the coal mines, and I just became very inspired to write his story.
Now, an interesting thing I want to pick up on here. You said your grandfather was in the coal mines. Do you know where he worked at?
Yeah, my grandfather worked in Berwyn White coal mines. He was pulled out of school at 9 years old, and he started working in the coal mines when he was 9 years old.
So the reason I ask that is that I'd heard this, I just a few years ago heard this story about, obviously you've heard the mining accident in Monong, West Virginia. And that was the big one. A lot of Italians were killed in that accident. And that was the big one that was so bad that actually changed a lot of the laws. So after that, safety was like, well, wait a minute, maybe we should actually care about these people. But what's funny was the fact that how many kids were shoved in the mines. I mean, when people talk about, nowadays, what I'm going to call, the workplace, it's like, my God, if they could just open a bleeping book and see how bad it was 80, 100 years ago, what kids were, quote, doing for work, and they weren't exactly getting paid for it, and there was no safety measures, and frankly, they just didn't care. They're poor, they're immigrants, throw them into the mines, throw them into the mills, whatever.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. And in the little town of Wimber, what was interesting was that the East End was called Little Italy, and all the Italians lived there. The West End was Polish, Slovakians, Irish, and the people that owned the mines didn't want the two groups to mix together and communicate because there were so many injustices happening in the mine.
Oh, interesting. So how did they keep them separated?
So they kept them separated on different sides of town, but then eventually what happened is that the two groups got together and they formed a union, and then suddenly the workers began to get rights. And I mean, by this time, my grandfather was an adult. Eventually, he ended up getting black lung, as a lot of coal miners do. They shut down the mines, but he had saved his money, and his dream was to open a pizzeria.
Wow. And so, I mean, hard work paid off. I mean, what's funny is a lot of people, even to this day, don't understand when we talk about the American dream. Again, and I don't want to get philosophical, but when you talk about the American dream, it literally means that if you're willing to work and pay your dues and save and live right, life right, you can lift yourself out of that. A lot of people just aren't prepared to do that, and I don't think they understood how hard those immigrants worked, and they had a very different appreciation for money that I think we don't have it now. Now, what was one of the first books you wrote? You said you wrote about your grandfather's experiences?
Sure. So yeah, my first book came out in August, and it's called A Story About Pizza, and it follows my grandfather, Pietro Americo, from Abruzzo to the United States, his journey in the coal mines, and then as he goes on this journey of trying to open this pizzeria.
Okay. Now, pizzeria is still there?
Yeah, it's still there.
What year did it open?
1960.
Wow. So that's not, I mean, tell you what, for a pizza shop to stick around for 85 years now? Or no, I'm sorry, 65 years now. Wow.
Yeah, still family owned.
That's
my
fantastic.
dad still runs it.
Don't worry, we're gonna let you advertise that here in a second, but I want to keep going with the books now. So that's your first book. Now, obviously, the book is successful. Okay, what happens next? Did you just fall in love with writing, or was there just more stories that were just popping out?
I fell in love with writing, but I was talking to my friend. We were talking about the book, and she said this would be a really beautiful children's series. And so I launched a children's book series that is about Italian culture, immigration, food, and family. And so the first book came out on National Pizza Day, which was a few days ago. It's called Pietro's Pizza. And then I have 11 more books that are coming out within the next 2 years or so.
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. Now, are these bilingual or just English only?
Right now, they're English only. What I'd love to do is translate them into Italian, but I'm also working on my next novel, which is about Italian Christmases.
Ooh. That will be interesting because I think there are definite similarities. Again, I've interviewed a lot of folks, and there are a lot of similarities, but there are subtle differences between the style of food and what they do based on regions, obviously. But that would be an interesting one because I take it, are you going to focus on multiple regions, or are you looking at just, kind of stick with Abruzzo and stick with the family?
I'm going to stick with Abruzzo and stick with the family. And we always had our Christmas Eve dinner at our pizza place, and my grandparents would invite between 40 and 60 or 70 people. So it was a very interesting holiday for everyone.
And noisy, but I'll bet that was a lot of fun.
So fun. And then we would do midnight mass, and they would do a bunch of hot sausage and meatball sandwiches after midnight because you couldn't have meat before midnight. Right. So that was kind of the tradition that we had. So
1 a.m., you're scarfing down the hot Italian sausage and the meatballs, and then you're going to bed about 3 or 4, and then you're probably up at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning cooking for your Christmas deal.
Yeah, making the ravioli for the next day.
That's it. All right, folks, I'm going to be right back because I'd like to pay the bills, so I'll be right back after these messages. Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. For all of your plumbing needs, be sure to try Palucci Plumbing. Nick and the team have decades of experience and will get you back up and running. For more information, call Palucci Plumbing at 412-782-5050. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. That's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. All right, welcome back. All right, so we were talking about Christmas. And, you got your next book coming up. But I want to go back to the bilingual books because it kind of ties into something I mentioned before. So I've had a guest on here, Armand Bazzelli, who wrote a book called Rosie's Red Sauce. And, we worked with him, and he ended up getting that translated into Italian. And the nice thing, one of the things I like to see, and this is actually they're not as common as you think, but children's books that are in English and Italian but also provide a little vocabulary are always a good idea. Because I think if you're going to read to your kids, and again, I'm trying to encourage that, learning the language young, I think having that in front of you. So I hope you do that where you translate them from English to Italian, and then you sell a version that has both the English and the Italian. Are you doing any kind of, audiobooks with this or just straight up, just paper?
I would love to do an audiobook for the first book. For the children's series, I think we're going to do the translation. And then the first book is just Pietro's Pizza. But the other books each have a recipe. And the whole goal with that is for a parent to cook with a child. And I have recipes also in my main book, A Story About Pizza. Each chapter has a recipe of something that they were cooking during that area in the book.
Oh, that's kind of a great idea because, you put a little context to the recipe because, again, depending on the region of the person, they come over here, they tweak it a little bit. That's awesome. So you're writing the books, you're trying to, promote the culture. What are some other big things you're kind of involved in as far as, continuing, not just to promote the family? Because this has been my theme also, that I do think everyone has kind of a neat story. Your grandfather, he immigrates over here. How old was he immigrated over here when he came here?
Oh, I mean, a young boy.
So like, say, 8, 9, 10?
Yeah, I mean, he started working in the coal mines when he was 9, so I think probably around 7 years old or something like that.
So folks that are listening, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So here is a guy that comes over here, very young kid, probably doesn't have much education, probably comes from poverty. If he's coming from Abruzzo around the time frame you're telling me, I'm guessing, was that right after the war?
Yeah, I mean, where the book is, the setting of the book is it's around 1910 or so.
Okay. Oh, so it was before. Oh, sorry, he came over before the war.
Yeah.
Okay, because there was a gap where people could not immigrate after the war. So he comes over before the war. So he was coming out of poverty up in those mountain towns in Abruzzo. He comes over here. He's a young kid. Probably doesn't speak much English. After a couple years, obviously they pull him out of school, throw him into the mines. Now I ask you right there, How is that not something that's, the people shouldn't understand the importance? And my whole philosophy is that is important to never forget that because that sort of stuff happened, and it happened to a lot of people. And now he works in the mines. How long did he work in the mines for?
Oh, I mean, most of his life from 9 years old until, 1960 or I'd say 1955 because he bought the building and then he turned it into an Italian market. And then in 1960, they started making pizza. So
he was actually in that mine probably for close to 40 years.
Yeah, most of his life.
Wow. So again, there's more that says, hey, this is a guy that is not a nobody. He comes over here on a boat. Did his whole family come with him? How many people actually immigrated with him?
So it was him, his mom and his dad, his 3 brothers, and then they had a a daughter, and she passed away, I think, right after she was born. So it was the 4 boys and the parents.
Oh, so they come over here, again, trying to start a new life. Probably not treated well back then because we all know how Italians were treated. So bad that he goes in the mines at age, by 9, he's in the mines working, stays there for 40 years. Could easily have had every reason in the world to say, life sucks, but he doesn't. Saves his money. Obviously raised a good parents because that's a ripple effect down to you. So he works hard, raises his family, saves his money, never gave up on his dream, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, he was just a steadfast, hardworking, loyal human being.
And again, so now he buys this, like you said, saves enough money, buys the building, opens it up as a market, and at some point, now did he quit the mines, get fired, or just said, the hell of it, I'm opening the pizza shop?
Well, the mines began to close down, but also he got black lung.
So he had no choice. He was out of there. How long, if you don't mind me asking, how long did he live after that?
So he lived until, I think it was 2000 and...
Oh, wow.
No, 1999. He passed away, and he was 84 years old. He had cancer.
So, the life expectancy of somebody living in the mines, that's actually a very good life, all things considered, because, like you said, in the 1920s and the 30s, they probably weren't worried about safety or breathing. You throw the canary down there to make sure there's enough oxygen or make sure there's no toxic gas going on. As long as the canary's alive, you're down there digging. I mean, am I wrong on that?
No, you're right about that. And I mean, for him to go through that, he was such a kind, giving person, and he would always make sure that people had a place to go and that they had food, and just going through that and that not changing him was very beautiful.
Well, again, he could easily. I mean, people can easily get bitter in life, and then this is why I love these stories, because it's impactful to me, and if people are listening, you got to realize there's always somebody worse than you, and someone like your grandfather could have, like I said, he could have easily become a bitter person, screw it, or gave up, but he didn't. And I think that's one of those lessons we keep trying to beat into younger people before they realize what the opportunities they are so much greater than, they would have had, say, 80, 90, 100 years ago. Like I said, you had to literally work yourself out of a mine to, save enough money to eventually then go on to buy a pizza shop, which is still there, hands it down to the family. Let's talk about the pizza shop now, because you and I are going to go eat there. Now, what would you say what's your favorite meal there, and what are they best known for? Because obviously, if a pizza shop survives 65 years, you're doing something right.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so interesting because I always judge a pizza place by their traditional pizza. That's also my favorite thing that I order. And that's the thing we do the best, which is my grandfather's original pizza. It's a rectangular pizza, 15 slices, Abruzzo-style pizza. His recipe, we make the dough fresh every day. We grate the cheese. We make the sauce. And it is my favorite thing to eat there. And I mean, this has been my entire life of eating there, and I get that every time I go there.
Hey, let me ask you a question. You said square. I used to think that's how the Sicilians made it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
that's how...
That's that's a Abruzzo thing, because when I grew up, the place that I remember eating the most up the street from me, they did the square pizza. Oh, it was delicious. I always thought that they called like Sicilian or something. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, or it just didn't matter, because I always thought that was like a geographic thing, whether it was round or square.
I think it is, but for whatever reason, from where he was from, that was the pizza that they made. And he never baked the pepperoni on. He put the pepperoni on it after it came out of the oven.
Ooh. Why did he do that?
I think just because of the grease, and they still do it that way. So unless you ask for the pepperoni baked on, they put it on after.
I'm going to be honest with you. I know a lot of people like it when they bake that and they get those like little puddles of grease in the pepper. I can't. I'm just thinking like, you might as well just insert that directly into my, atrial valve in my heart, because I can't believe that is healthy for you to just, eat those greasy pizzas like that. I don't know. So I'm kind of like probably better served if I don't have a bunch of oil dripping off the pizza. But hey, that's me. So what else is going on? So now you've got the books are out. You're working on the children's series. What's next for you?
So the next thing for me is actually I have a pizza podcast, and who I interview are family-owned pizzerias.
Oh, okay. What's the name of the podcast?
Pizza Story.
See, I told you. Listen, I'm going to tell you, you're gonna promote the hell out of your stuff on this show. So, Pizza Story podcast. I want everybody listening is going to go out and they're going to find Pizza Stories. Is it on most of the major streaming services?
Oh yeah, it's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's everywhere you can listen to a podcast.
All right. So, Pizza Stories. Now, what's the name of the books? Where if people want to go out and what are the books called? And where can they find them?
Sure. So if you Google a story about pizza, that's pretty much every handle, every social media handle, the website, and you can get the book there. And then the children's series, the first book is called Pietro's Pizza, was just out on Sunday, and it's on the website, but you can also go on Amazon and just look up Pietro's Pizza.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me I have my first scoop here? Am I the first show you've done since the book came out?
You are the first major show that I've done since the book came out.
I always thought you were going to say first show. All right, so I appreciate that. Well, that's okay. I'm going to call it a scoop anyway. So, breaking news, Erica's book has just come out on Sunday. No, because this podcast, one thing I'll give about Joe is when I record the show, I mean, this thing is out in a day or two. So, if you're listening to this, we probably just recorded yesterday or the day before. That is fantastic. So, listen, I want to thank you again for your time, for joining me today. And I want to encourage all of my listeners to go out and support other folks in the community. Erica, you've been a wonderful guest. And I'm going to put some of the links down here in the description. So folks, you can click on that. You can watch your podcast if you want to get a copy of the books. When you get back to when you get back to pizza, yes, when you get back to pizza, but when you get back to Pittsburgh, you and I are going out to the pizza shop, and we're going to have some pizza. And I actually can't wait for that because I don't want a bunch of greasy. I do not want a bunch of greasy pepperoni dripping on me.
No, it won't be. It's going to be great.
I like your attitude. That's why we're going to keep you. All right. So listen, folks, I want to thank you again for tuning in. And I will be back next week. I think I might actually have 2 guests next week, but I haven't figured that out yet. I'm still working that. But at least 1 guest next week. So I want to thank, as always, my sponsors. I want to thank my guest. I want to thank you, the listeners. And I want to say, thank you to all the listeners from all over the world. Again, the fact that you are tuning in to give me some time in your life, I cannot express my gratitude. So thank you very much. God bless you, and I will see you next week.